Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JB and Millie channel. I am JB and joining me as always is Rhianna.
Hi.
And our special guest today is Mr. Peter Crosman. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm glad we could make this happen after a couple of concerted efforts that failed, but here we are.
No, I mean, it's amazing because we absolutely love your work. I mean, people watching this will initially know you from the first two Scooby Doo movies. And so having loved them for so much and admiring the work on it, it would almost be criminal if you weren't busy, at this time. So it's brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And I think going into your career, I guess starting from the beginning, we can see that the first kind of credits that we found for you on IMDb date all the way back to visual effects in the 1990s. So what was that like, and where did your inspiration come from for getting into visual effects?
Well, I was definitely influenced by movies, of course. And I had an older brother who used to oblige my parents in getting me out of the house, and he would take us to the local theater. And at that time, you could sort of hide under the seats between shows and watch the same movie over and over again all afternoon. So we watched a couple movies that I should not have seen at my tender age of like 6, but nonetheless, I saw every horror movie, every action adventure. And there were just certain movies that I'm sure, got into my skin like an early, inspirational inoculation, an inspiration. And they were things like The Time Machine and The Pit and the Pendulum and, some really old history of horror movies. So Bose and I have a little bit of that in common. Bill Bose is my good friend, and it's because we had a couple of opportunities to collaborate on movies that we know each other, and he has quite a rich history of movie making and movie watching, and we share that in common, that passion. But anyway, these early movies, I'm sure, influence what I did when my parents won a camera. This odd thing happened where my parents went on a game show and they won a movie camera and projector and brought it home. And again, I was very young, but my dad neglected it. And my brother, fortunately, would help me get it out. And we shot some movies, and the rest is history. We started making some movies. And then eventually I started working with my drawings in a kind of kinetic way in book margins and that sort of thing. And so I started making flip books, and I actually do have some stuff to share. Like, I think I have a bunch of flip books that I collected in the day, but my first one was about horse bones and running, because I was inspired by a photographer named Muybridge, who made a very famous bet that he could prove that a horse left the ground. And Leland Stanford, it was at Stanford Research. But anyway, and I have to flip this way, which is kind of counterintuitive, but you can see a running horse, a little running horse, and eventually a grid of horses, and then they run off. But anyway, I published this as like a Christmas gift for several people, and ended up selling it in art bookstores when I was just basically still in college. And I also got to know a lot of animators over the years who made these amazing flip books. This one is by an animator that we really love the work of, Paul Glebicki. And Kathy Rose. There was like a New York animators group that I got to work with. This is pretty awkward. I'm probably going to do this backwards, but she made a thing called Pencil Booklings, which I'm probably going in reverse. But anyway, flip books were completely fascinating to me because you didn't need any production, accoutrement at all. You didn't need an expensive camera and a crew and everything, and you could still generate these movies. And so I made an effort to learn animation and got to know a particular guy named Al Jarno in New York, and we ended up making quite a few animated pictures together for things like Sesame Street and 3-2-1 Contact, and some shows that were on for kids. And that was my introduction to animation production. And from there, I ended up going to the West Coast and meeting John Korty. It's a long story, but essentially I was able to roll my journalist time at my college, which is Midwest Ohio. I interviewed a filmmaker who came to town who was an alumna. And John Korty told me about his studio on the West Coast. And you know how people always say, hey, come visit me when you're out on the West Coast. And at the time I thought Mill Valley was near Los Angeles. But he said, I'm in Mill Valley. And I didn't know that was near San Francisco, but years later, I went and visited him, and lo and behold, he had a movie called Twice Upon a Time that he was recruiting animators for. And I ended up jumping from sort of New York and the East Coast public broadcasting scene to like entertainment, because this was sort of tied to John Korty, who was a indie filmmaker, but he also had ties to George Lucas and Marcia Lucas, who helped him finance this movie called Twice Upon a Time. Sadly, John Korty just passed away very recently, but he was 85. He had an amazing life. And I'm going to his memorial this weekend to see a lot of the people that I met on that show. So that's, in broad strokes, that got me to Industrial Light and Magic. And at Industrial Light and Magic, I did some of the bigger features that came through the doors there. I have a couple of clips I could probably show of some early ILM stuff if you want me to, you know, just as a teaser, or I could go to that later, whichever you prefer. But that'd be a share screen.
Yeah, of course we can do that. We can do that now if that's okay, please. That'd be
Sure,
incredible
sure.
to kind
Well,
of have
you
a
know,
tour through that.
It helps tell the story. So you have to enable the screen share for me, I think.
Determined
Oh
my
yeah.
adaptation to wanting
So
a life
this
as an artist.
was
in a
a
sense,
this
and
was an
one of them was
interview
definitely
that I did for Deadline magazine, and I put it into this format in order to show several people my early work. And it was at the time, just ignore the fact that there's a series going on here called Made for Love. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get to the this is where I came to the finding Al
he had
Jarno.
sent to me after our interviews and everything, come visit in Mill Valley. I went and visited him in Mill Valley, and lo and behold, he was shooting an animated production that was being done with stop motion. And I applied for the work there, and I got it, and my lifestyle changed immediately from East to West Coast. And
So this is the gentleman I worked with in New York. His name is Al Jarno, and similar to the flip books I showed you, this was his process.
Interest in making film always was trying to make something come alive, was trying to make a system which would take on some life of its own. And I'd always thought about cycles as both a very efficient way of making films, taking things and using them as repeating loops, but also how they had a whole lot of philosophical implications, either repeated in long loops of time or short loops of time, and became interested in the passage of sunlight over the course of a year as another reflection of that. The subject matter of my paintings were really very often just a vessel for the light.
So pretty amazing guy, a painter, and his interest in animation, you know, basically extended to all these natural phenomena. So I did
backgrounds could change separately.
movies like this, or
I might have isolated him at one point into a separate
3-2-1 Contact.
So each element
with
within
future
a scene
cities, we're showing sort of
can
this
change
progression
without
of
having to
time.
redraw the entire scene every time, which is a reason for doing like this. But it took a lot more production detail than a lot more people working in this factory space to get this stuff done.
Anyway, so they're basically this is like my original inspiration was drawing these things, and I basically tell the introduction to John Korty, who's going to introduce something called the Animators. But this is just some of the early work I did while I was in college, a movie called Equestrian Kinesthetics, and that's why I named the flip book the same.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So this is John Korty.
My name is John Korty. I've been working in films almost 30 years, and most people know me for live action work like the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. Actually, I started in animation, and when I was 16 years old, I got fascinated by animation, and I've done it a little bit all along, but we've just recently finished a full-length animated feature called Twice Upon a Time, and it has to do with fantasy and reality. It has to do with being in the stream of time or out of it, and whether fantasy lands are better than reality.
And I'm just going to show you a couple clips of this crazy
Academy Award winner John Korty
and
Lucasfilm
special
Limited
effects
take you to a
driven
place so far out
feature.
you'll never,
Ooh.
never land. Lava lamp galleries.
This was my lava lamps shot that I learned so much in it.
Office supplies.
Whole office nightmare that I did with director Henry Selick, who was working there.
It isn't nice
That's
to
what
mess
it
with fairy godmothers.
Oh, Nightmare Before Christmas.
The tallest
Nightmare Before
tale you could
Christmas,
never
exactly.
possibly imagine is coming at you.
Thank you.
And it can only happen twice upon a time.
So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about. This is some stuff that Henry did. Henry Selick created a little indie company, and after Twice Upon a Time, Henry and several other artists, including myself as technical director and animator, did these MTV IDs, which were tremendous fun and part of my early inception into doing visual effects. So you can see that crazy range of techniques that we're using. It's puppet animation, it's you know, 2D animation, all nested, and but they were pretty primitive. You know, we had a limited budget to do them, and they took, you know, you can tell many hours of iterative, you know, stop motion time. But this is all Henry Selick's kind of designs and led up to
My first
his technique
production
on
was Tank Girl,
Oof.
which I did.
jumping into another movie entirely. But I digress. But I'm going to go to where Bill Bowes and I intersect. And this is Jack Ryan. I'm going to jump ahead here, but you guys are interested in the stuff that Bill Bowes and I started working on together. And the first time we got together was on Monkeybone, going way back. And you know something about that from Bill now, right?
Yeah, I think we were showing one of the little models of them, and obviously the hand stayed and everything.
Yeah. So at that time, we basically collaborated on that with Henry Selick. And I think I've got just some creature stuff. I don't know how well you know Monkeybone, but this is where Bill Bowes' design I just thought was unbelievable. This is this crazy hand that Bill talked about designing the theme park in the center of the hand. So there you go. There's a clip of Monkeybone. And we can go out of share screen for a minute if you want to. Out. And we can talk some more about, you know, post, you know, getting into the industry.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank
showing
you.
that to us. I literally felt like I was like And this is going to sound like an insult, and it definitely isn't, but almost like being back at school when like the teacher would put on a video, except this was like the most captivating thing in the world. I almost forgot that this was recording, and I was just like, okay, I'm at a university degree. I really want to do this. How do I get into this industry? So I feel so immersed. I'm going to have to change my mindsets now back to the questions, but thank you so much for that. That's fantastic.
Oh, that's yeah. Well, it's always good to get right up front and into the work. I haven't watched this stuff for many years either, you know, so I'm seeing some of these original moments, and you know, because you guys asked me questions about Scooby and Scooby 2, which of course is going to be just a bit later, but it's the same thread. It's Bill and I with our respective talents working together, you know, and my job as a visual effects supervisor depends on a production designer really making whatever's in the director's head tangible, you know, and that's what Bill's so good at. He can work with the director and start sketching up stuff. He goes at the pre-production furiously and produces all this amazing imagery. And then we pick and choose, you know, what it is that we're going to pursue. And of course, I get to take it to another dimension, this sort of plasticity dimension, and tie some of these crazy techniques together.
I definitely can see how that can go like hand in hand in every single part of the movie making process. And like you've mentioned about your inspirations and everything, when I speak to people of my generation and like a little bit more, and this isn't like movie generation, you know, so like the next, you know, big blockbuster of every 5 years. So I think, you know, I hear a lot about people talking about my first memory in the cinema is seeing Monsters Inc. for the first time, or seeing like, you know, Jurassic Park the first time they see a dinosaur. So was there like a cinematic moment for you when you were first seeing movies that made you go, wow, this is something that I really want to do?
Oh, it has to be Stanley Kubrick's 2001, which I saw at a very young age. And I was instrumental in persuading several of my friends to go. And they didn't like the movie very much because it was way beyond the capacity of most people to really understand. And I can reveal to you, I was in the 5th grade. I mean, that's when I saw it, and I got all these young minds to go out and see it, but it changed my life. I just thought, like, this is completely immersive in a tangential dimension that I can't even fathom without you know, being taken there by somebody as gifted as Kubrick. And at the time I didn't know Doug Trumbull, who had been behind the scenes doing that. He had his dad had been in the industry and had worked on things like The Wizard of Oz, and he was available to help Stanley Kubrick with his vision. And I would henceforth get to know him many years later, because the industry is pretty small. It started out kind of small. Now it's gone into sort of a big bang where, you know, there were, you know, 10 companies that could produce high-end visual effects, and now there's 2,000, 3,000. But nonetheless, 2001 and all the other Kubrick movies, you know, completely blew my mind, you know, and that's certainly set me in the direction of thinking, you know, beyond the scope of, you know, meaningful but primitive, you know, artwork and flip books and all that sort of thing. And I didn't know how that would end up, you know, how I could end up working on something as complex as 2001. But I knew that there were movies being made like that. And, you know, I pursued them in my own ways, you know, having gotten some training at Industrial Light and Magic, where I worked on things like Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, Indiana Jones 3. You know, I was basically just working as an animator. There were like 10 of us in the department, but we got to see things like Star Trek, did some shots for Star Trek 6, and pursued, you know, meeting producers and visual effects professionals in Los Angeles. I went from San Francisco, which is where ILM was at that time, in San Rafael, California, to Los Angeles in about 1990, 91. And the rest is history, right? I get to meet Bill Bowes down here. He was a San Francisco guy too, as it turns out. But I didn't meet him until later when he came down to Los Angeles and was working, had worked for Henry on Nightmare Before Christmas. And so he was in Henry's, group of artists when I got to meet him. And Henry and I Henry's really the link between Bill Bowes and I.
Oh wow, that's amazing, especially hearing about like the kind of Stanley Kubrick inspiration, because just like the way you're saying, like there was a group of people that really loved it and a group of people that didn't like it. It almost seems like that's the trend of Stanley Kubrick projects. Like when The Shining came out, like almost everyone loved it, and then Stephen King was like, himself, he was like, oh, that's not really my thing, I don't really like how he did that. So quite divisive, but always groundbreaking, which is just amazing to hear.
Yeah, well, he left he left a lot to the imagination and ambiguity. People didn't like the fact that he didn't answer the questions, and his universe is an indifferent universe, and that is troubling, but it's also existential and real to me. That is the thing that struck me about that movie, 2001. And he was obviously telling us that we're no more than those apes, with the bone, that goes into the spin, and the spin becomes the blue Danube and the spaceship, and it's like, yes, we've traveled, a huge distance in technology, but we are the same primitive beasts, at the heart of it. And then of course he goes into AI and HAL, there's so many incredible ideas that would be seminal in so many other movies after 2001. But
that's amazing. And I think after this interview, I'm definitely going to try and find the movie and watch it, because how I was describing it sounds something that's just so amazing. And I don't know why I've not seen it sooner. And, your whole journey from, doing flip books to working on other projects and everything, it's so amazing, so interesting as well, because see how everything comes together. And it seems like you've gone to work on so many different projects with like-minded people, which is obviously really important in this business. And one of the things that you most recently worked on was the second and third season of Fear the Walking Dead, which I really loved that show. And many consider that like those two seasons are the golden age of the show. So what was that experience like compared to other movies that you worked on?
Well, there's a big difference right away, because you're now talking about a series. And of course, what happened between, movie making, and I was fortunate enough to join the Academy of Motion Pictures, which is a feature-based, theater-based environment and, universe. And I actually I took a while to get into the TV series world, but eventually, the work, the quality of the work and the budgets and everything else were starting to really come up. And of course, we've gone so far since even the time that I was working on Fear the Walking Dead. But it's, always, you're absolutely right. It's the minds at the center of the story making. And that's Dave Erickson, and some of those directors, that he worked with in making that universe of Fear the Walking Dead, and of course those characters too, so yeah, that was fascinating. And you're right, I had two roles originally. I had a great friend named Boyd Shermis, who did some work with Bill Bowes also. Boyd Shermis did Journey to the Center of the Earth, right, or the Journey movie that Bill worked on, and he hired me as the on-set supervisor, which was kind of liberating, because an on-set supervisor really concerns himself with how everything is shot in the best possible manner for the visual effects team to take those plates and those ideas and storyboards and take them to the full finish at the end. So the only thing I didn't have to concern myself with was the budgeting of those scenes in advance, and the working out creative differences with the directors and showrunners in advance. So that was Boyd's job. And by the time I got down there, the work had been decided, and it was I simply read the scripts and broke them down and made sure I had everything I needed on set. And it was a fantastic experience, of course. And I really enjoyed the fact that there were several directors for each of the season episodes, and they all had a different style of working. And that's one of the best things you can learn, is watching different people's approach to the work, different directors. And I did have some favorites. You asked me if in season 2, I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed one particular. I'm going to share screen again and take you back to, and is it sharing already?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, Fear the Walking Dead, season 3. I'm just going to show you these different sequences. Here's a witness camera
Oh yeah.
of Joe. This is the crab man who was left stranded on the beach, and this is what it looked like on set. And I actually had puppeteers working on these primitive.
Oh wow.
Wow.
And this is him just in standard makeup. He's obviously cut into the hole in the ground. And, you know, I'm going to have to do things like fuse the ground with him and make the CG crabs come to life. And he's going to be eating these crabs off the beach. And they're also going to be climbing around inside his guts and that sort of thing. So here's the start of it. You can see there's things about the shot that are still to work out. You know, you can see the bucket, other things, but he just keeps doing his acting, pretending that he's eating these crabs. So that's a pretty good sense of what he's doing. And then you've got the finished shots, and I'll just show you some of these. So this is what a shot looks like when it's just in the. That's a short one. I'll go right to the next one. These are each of the shots as the artists finish with them. That's a quick one too, but you saw the crabs very quickly. I'll stop on one of these. Oops. There's a good close-up. Go back, and now you can see how realistic those crabs are. They're quite
Wow.
good.
Yeah. Even the movement is so
Yeah, like
accurate.
the grabbing, it's so tangible
Oh.
and tactile.
Yeah. No, they are really good, and I like the wider shots always. But yeah, look at this. This is just too much. We called this sequence the Krabby Snacks sequence. You know, a little ode to Scooby Doo. But anyway, this is one of my favorite things. I mean, it's one thing to skewer people and create a lot of blood and everything, but this was a really special little assignment. So Boyd let me see that one through. And there's other stuff that's not quite as interesting. But anyway, other parts of that, you know, you're behind the scenes deciding on what you can and can't do. And there's a scene in which Nick gets attacked by dogs.
yeah.
And so we had a day on set with a dog just to let the director and myself know what the dog was capable of. So this guy volunteers, and he's got, you know, a big rug over his leg. And there's the trained dog. And I'm not sure I have that particular sequence, unfortunately, but that's kind of the fun stuff that happens in the course of doing it. And I'm going to show you another. When I got to season 3, there were some other really challenging things. I'm just going to show you how that. One of the things about it is that they like to do stuff that was pretty big. So this is the season finale of the 3rd season. So here's the breakdown. I just want to show you the dam itself.
Wow.
So here's our model. Basically, it took 3 days to scan this dam and make it into a model that could be destroyed. And we conceived of all the different shots based on having this rendered landscape that we could play with. There's the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And then many layers later, this was actually done by Rodeo Effects up in Montreal. We share these shows with several vendors because of the complexity and the time needed to get the show done. So that's the kind of demo we put together occasionally when there's the possibility of going for an Emmy Award or something for the work. And that was nominated for an Emmy, the particular episode. So that's why I showed you that. But yeah, so you were asking about, oh, let me go back. I can come back to this later. Yeah, you were asking me the difference between on set versus being the full visual effects supervisor. And one is more of a managerial job, and it's still more fun to be the full visual effects supervisor and deal with the budgets and the creative and that sort of thing. But I will say the on-set job, you're clear from a lot of the things that you have to go home after the day on set and work on for 3 or 4 hours. So that's definitely worthwhile. I did a very similar thing on Jack Ryan. I was the on-set supervisor for season 2 of Jack Ryan. And that was a very immersive experience also. And it's like working on, 4 features, all together. And they're so elaborate. And so I enjoyed the process of series work just about as much as the feature work, I would say,
Yeah, it's just been incredible, and it's so surreal to see all that, because I think something that Fear the Walking Dead did so well is that it never really felt like a TV show in the moment.
Yeah.
You felt like you were genuinely watching real characters in their real life fighting to survive every episode. And so to kind of see it broken down, it's just so interesting, because you wouldn't think, because from like a point of view of a fan that watches the show, it does almost feel like this is what's happening. There's like a camera team on this group of survivors in an alternate reality, and that's what's going on. But to get a glimpse into the work that goes into making those cinematic shots feel so real and so immersive is just amazing. And I guess we've kind of skipped over a few of the Walking Dead ones, but I guess my final one on that point would be, in a lot of season 2 involved, the kind of crew of survivors on the Abigail boat for a lot of it, and being on set at the on-set supervisor for that, did you have to like go on a separate boat following that? Was it not a boat at all? Like, you can never really tell.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If I were to show the behind the scenes on the Abigail, I probably have. Let's see what I have to show you. There really was no finished Abigail except in CG. It was an elaborate model. They made half the boat.
I almost feel a bit heartbroken because I imagine you in like a dinghy, like kind of like trailing.
Well, the funny thing is, you're not entirely wrong either. So let me just show you what I mean by that. And let's see if I have some of those elements. Let's see if it's productions or The Walking Dead 16. Let's see if I have that. Damn sequence. I probably have to show photos because the Abigail ship. Yep, it's let's see if I can find that. I'll just show you. I'll share my screen and show you what I got. The Abigail ship was, and I made elaborate notes. Are you seeing that?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, yes.
So, spare us, please. I'm gonna have to go. It wants to go right into Photoshop where I made my notes on it, but essentially, you can see. Okay. Yeah, we made only a fully CG model of it. I'm going to get out of that, and the rest of it was all designed as a half boat. There it is as a bit of a ship. And then let me see if I've got shoot. Yeah, so basically this half of it, the back end. Oh, yeah, this is actually the half. So you can see this is exactly what we built. And so we're missing the whole prow, the whole front end of the boat, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up executing. And we were in a moat in Rosarito Beach. And so we were actually shooting off of and I wish I had all the pieces of it, but I probably do have some. If I can show the, we got, the other problem was it was very expensive to have that boat. So as a result, they got rid of the boat very quickly. Oh, that's our Crabman episode. And they were more concerned about telling the ship, telling the story without having to involve so much time, on the boat, because it was very expensive. So, all right, well, unfortunately, I don't have the piece that I was hoping I would be able to show you. Let's see. Here we go. This should help. These are the tanks that we shot some of the stuff in, very large tanks. And let's see if I have the. I have there's some amusing memories of some of this stuff. It's pretty great. But yeah, the tank shooting was just one part of it, but I'm not sure. I had a whole study for how we end up doing. Oh, there's a keeper. Those are my friends on set. Yeah, so we built half a boat, and I was even given a tiny piece of the SS Abigail.
Oh, wow.
Show you when they finished the show, they cut up the boat and they gave everyone that was involved in the crew the Abigail pieces. That was pretty amusing.
That's
But yeah,
cool.
it was a half a boat, and whenever we went out to sea, we created the front half, and all of the ocean was computer generated water. We fixed the water that was adjacent to the model sitting in the tank, but it was all a big illusion.
Oh my gosh. I actually feel ridiculous now because I did just have this like image of a real boat and you on a dinghy making notes about stuff.
It's
it's
a very real boat.
It's a testament to the work.
And also we were on rafts that did pony up to the sides of this craft. It really was a half boat. And so it did have those problems. I mean, you had to get to places where you could both monitor the work by Wi-Fi on your mini, little iPad, and also, stay out of the way so that you're not in the shot. And there were some very elaborate 180, 200 degree moving shots with Steadicam and stuff. So it was quite an operation, but it was an expensive thing for the show to maintain. I will say that.
I will totally agree with JB. To his image that he had, that's exactly what was going through my mind, because everything looks so realistic, and it's strange to think of how many things in different movies and series is just CGI and what wasn't actually there. Because I guess the advance of technology helps that you can get more details and scan things more, but that was amazing. Thank you for showing us. And
yeah, no, it's a whole formula of production that takes place in advance, and yeah, you would never know how many pieces have to go into something that elaborate. I mean, look at all those pieces of the dam formation and flood. That was just a lot of shooting, and I'm blessed with being able to go out and help direct the tangential sort of second unit crews that do drone shots and all that sort of thing, or traipse around in the countryside and get plates of the dry beds that I know are going to be filled with raging water. So I know how to shoot something that's really a dead, dry, gulch. But I know that shot's going to be amazing because there's going to be flowing water, and we're going to follow the water down with something in the river. You get to imagine that stuff in advance and then go out and shoot the pieces.
It's phenomenal. And I guess kind of switching up the scene a little bit to kind of further on to things, if that's okay. I guess if Rhianna, would you like to kick us off with the Scooby questions? If that's
yeah.
So as you mentioned, you've worked with Bilbo's numerous times, and one of the projects that you worked on was the first live action Scooby Doo movie from 2002. So how did you get involved in the project?
Well, like Bilbo's, I was working at the Fox lot quite a lot, and Raja Gosnell actually asked me and Bill to work on Fantastic Four. And at that time, the technology was still pretty primitive. We were around the time that we had done some very significant movies. Obviously, the stuff we did at ILM was way ahead of subsequent efforts by lesser studios and the wider body of visual effects crews out there to handle. But there was some very elaborate work in Fantastic Four, and I don't think they liked the budget at at Fox. So unfortunately, the movie was stalled, but Raja got an offer to do Scooby Doo, and he reached out to Bill and to me, and we were our own respective department heads. And I said, of course, I would go to Tangalooma Island, which would become Spooky Island in Australia, to film the first Scooby Doo movie. And Bill and I were, very, very happy to be combined again, to, create another world. In this one, we both loved the original Hanna-Barbera Scooby. I love the fact that you've got an inspirational scene right behind you. But the good news was my talents were in animation, and we needed to create Scooby Doo. We needed a viable character as Scooby Doo. And that was a huge challenge. And I was delighted to take that on with the help of Rhythm and Hughes, who ended up doing, the vast majority of the Scoobies. There were some ancillary Scoobies that were done at another studio, but mostly that happened on Scooby Doo 2. Scooby Doo 1 was almost exclusively Rhythm and Hughes, but there was a lot of work to do to decide what the physiognomy of the facial characteristics of Scooby were going to be. And there were some producers who really loved the idea that he, just like the people who went from cartoon characters to Matthew Lillard, an actor. Similarly, they thought, well, it's a Great Dane, right? So we'll use a Great Dane. And I was like, I think you'd be giving up an awful lot if you decided it could be a Great Dane and not a cartoon character of some other, dimension. It needs big eyes, and, it needs a different whole approach.
I mean, you mentioned that you did get a chance to go to Tangalooma Island to do things, and I guess you spoke about the differentiating roles between, Fear the Walking Dead, where you were budgeting things and designing things, and then kind of making sure that shots were appropriate for, I guess, that side of things within that show. So, to what extent were you required to be on the sets within Tangalooma for the Scooby movie?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. I didn't have I didn't need an assistant so much because the work was, done in smaller pieces. Sometimes the series work has to be done so quickly that you need to divide and conquer. You need to shoot more of it simultaneously. But this was a one director, one vision, and we had a pretty good schedule to do it in. And, Bill had his work cut out for him even more than I did, because most of my work takes place in post-production. So I just have to make sure that everything that's being shot is set up carefully so that we don't have too much work to do that's extraneous work in post. But it was fantastic watching Bill, you know, come up with these sets and set designs. And there was, you know, some design work involved with, you know, the extra characters that were in it. For instance, the demons, you know, are in that first Scooby, and they were going to be handled by Warner Animation. So I had to be on set, you know, pretty constantly just to make sure that we were always shooting and framing for a rather large character. You know, Scooby is a big Great Dane. He's ultra, you know, he's supersized Great Dane. And, you know, I had to make sure we had models of the dog that we could shoot on set. And, you know, we also shoot mirror ball, gray ball. I mean, not to go into the great, you know, all the technical side of doing our job in visual effects. That is important though, you know, and so I had to make sure I was getting all the layers needed to set up and execute the movie. Let me see if I have some Scooby I can show you, some original Scooby. I'm missing a lot of the early Scooby because of which hard drives I brought to life. And SD1, Scooby-Doo 1 is on a really early set of the, so yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the reel that I was hoping I would have for this. Yeah, I wanted to show you the first of the passes on Tangalooma Island, but I'll have to provide that to you. I can send it in an email, you know,
Yeah,
and you can.
that would be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So anyway, so yeah, I could talk about what needed to be done on set, but there were a lot of different environments, some of which Bill discussed, which were the rides. I loved the dark rides that he did with the pendulum swinging through the as the cars came through. There was a lot of things to do with timing, and some of those things had to be done in all CG. And of course, there's that whole crazy Scrappy Doo Souls ending, you know, where we had a lot of elaborate we had a lot of elaborate gags to do with, you know, models and, you know, parts that had to be cleaned up in post. You know, you'd see the cables and that sort of thing. When Mondavarius's chest bursts and Scrappy Doo comes out, you know, there's some nutty stuff in that show. But I had such a great time, you know, conceiving of and working with the other actors when it came to like the monsters, you know, Velma getting held by one of those monsters, you know, and sort of semi-fainting. There were, and you were asking in your questions about who were the fun actors to work with, and of course Matthew Lillard was outstanding and so much fun to work with all the time. Did his job, you know, so superbly on Scooby 1 and 2. But anyway, yeah, so the important parts about being there were that, as I said, there's second unit work to do. So that approach shot, for instance, to the island, I think I probably have just that, but let me see if I can share my screen if I find that. You know what I'm talking about. Basically, it's the theme park that we discover on Tangalooma Island. Well, it starts out as just a dry pass with a helicopter across an island. And of course, we populated that with all computer generated and model miniature elements that Bill Bowes helped design and create. So we were always breaking down every elaborate big shot into how we would accomplish it when we got back to Los Angeles and filmed elements of it. You know, at the time we did a lot of real-time explosions and all at high speed, and then there was some computer generated imaging as well. So Scooby 1 actually featured you know, quite a lot of early, you know, and some pretty tough CG work, and including Scooby himself. It was definitely an elaborate and very difficult character thing.
I mean, there's been two other, well, technically three other Scooby-Doo live action movies, but two actually involving Scooby. And I think it's a common thing within the fandom that Scooby-Doo 1 and 2, you know, that Scooby looks more realistic than the more recent one from, I think it was 2010. I want to say. So there was like a time and technology, even though it had advanced, the 2002 and 2004 movies, everything was so spot on and things just looked amazing. And one thing about the Scooby Doo 2002 movie that's become really well known is how much it was changed because of a controversial test screening. And we're wondering, were there any scenes that you worked on that ended up being cut?
Yeah, there were things that were cut. And you're talking about the second Scooby, right? Because the first Scooby, there were things that we basically had to work out on, but it was the second Scooby that we did in Vancouver, where there were some problems with the monsters, and I think that's what you're talking about, basically the design of those monsters.
So
Or are you talking about Scooby 1?
I guess Scooby
Scooby
1, the
1.
kind of things that we've heard about that, probably not, it doesn't probably creep into the realm of VFX, but, you know, things to do with, I guess, the more adult themes of that movie. And I guess as well, like going deeper into maybe what would have been, I guess, your department was the use of kind of CGI and things and effects to kind of cover up the cleavage of certain characters. Like, was that something that your department had to work on?
There definitely was audience screenings in which they thought some of it was too risque. And we basically simulated, we had to basically, cover up side boobs, stuff that, we don't think about so much now. But you're right, it was an issue, and visual effects is there to basically help with that sort of thing. It's true. That's so funny that that was not a huge controversy or that different for us, because we always anticipate that they're going to be, there's they sort of censors, and you're always trying to achieve as low and wide an audience rating. You don't want a PG-13 on a Scooby Doo movie. So they did have to address a few things that they considered too risque, and the direction of it. There was the Velma chanteuse scene that dropped out where she got drunk, essentially. So there was also the controversy of like one of our characters getting hammered,
I mean, it's so wild.
So this is James, it's James Gunn and the producers, and we thought it was great, but of course it had to go, and that scene did drop out. But Linda did an amazing job of that. There's a bit of it left, as I recall, but it's not so clear that she's tanked. But she's sort of supposed to be in that state even when she gets picked up by the monsters, because otherwise she would be much more sharp.
Yeah.
I actually have never thought about that.
Yeah, she would have been much more astute, but she gets picked up by the monsters and she ends up like, ripping one of their faces, and stretching it.
She's kind of like, it's just a mask. It's
like
all
cool
okay.
costume.
Yeah, she does a kind of a Pete Davidson thing, like, it's another monster, but so, and we always thought that was hilarious, but it was born out of probably that approach where she was a little tipsy, and but yeah, that didn't seem so controversial for us. We're always doing some kind of cover-ups or whatever, if there's any censors that want to be stricter about what's seen in the movie. And we can do quick things like you were saying, erase cleavage. We did soften cleavage, as I recall.
I mean, it's so wild when you say that, and you're absolutely right. Like at the time, like a PG-13 Scooby would be something that isn't even possible now. But just recently, they announced that Mindy Kaling is going to be producing a Velma series that's aimed at adults, and there's already been a clip released, and there's like kind of half-naked girls in the background. There's someone decapitated on the floor, and so with Scooby in, I guess now 2022, taking steps to dive into the possibility of a more adult-centric series, I guess the conversation now is more real than ever, like about potentially seeing the original cut of the first movie. Like, do you know if any of that footage could be still like lying around anywhere, or even still in existence now?
Oh, I'm sure Warner Brothers would be able to find it. It's a question of whether the will was there, for a re-release. But yeah, it's not out of the question, we could ask Raja to do a director's cut. I'm sure he'd be honored,
Oh, well, that'd be amazing.
But-
Maybe for the 25th anniversary at this
There
point.
you
now.
go.
Yes.
That'd
There
be
you
nice.
go.
And do
Absolutely.
you have a favorite memory from working on Scooby One at all?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think it was the whole experience of going to Tangalooma Island was fantastic. That's just a lovely island off the coast of Australia, but not too far from the area that we were staying near Brisbane. And every night there were dolphins that came by and were fed off the beach. So we were working at night, but there was always a time that you could take a break and kind of run up there, and you could see that the dolphins had come in, and there was a guy that's sort of a wildlife specialist, and he would throw fish for them, and people tried to pat them. You're really not supposed to do that, but it was just a lovely experience, and the whole crew was out there. The cast had to come out, the extras, the whole scene was sort of mayhem. And it was something else having that island as a real place that we were making Spooky Island and all those gags. It was a very special time, and there weren't enough real places to go, restaurants, bars, there wasn't any of that, but we sort of made it up as we went along, and we had sort of a nightlife of sorts, which was really fun. And then during the day, if you were on the weekend, there were things like dunes where they had cardboard, and you could slide down a dune, hundreds and hundreds of feet. So definitely that's my best memory of Scooby Doo 1 is, and my kids were young and they were out there with us, my wife and I and 2 kids. So, and they got to know Shaggy and Scooby, and Scooby wasn't real, but of course the voice of Scooby, Nick, was there, and it was just an amazing time and crew, I'll say.
Oh wow! Like, we've spoken to so many people who, when describing the cast and crew and everyone's relationship, it sounds like everyone was very much like a family, and you all had fun working on different things. And I know you mentioned that you really enjoyed working alongside like Matthew Lillard. Were there any members of the cast and crew that you tended to gravitate more to and spend more time with?
Yeah, I would say Matthew. I probably spent the most time with. Freddie, Prinze Jr., and Sarah Michelle Gellar, they sort of had a universe unto themselves, and then Linda Cardellini was great fun, and got to see her out of character on near set or whatever. She was very approachable and a very sweet person, and always great to compare notes with. She's a real natural, and I thought she did such an amazing job of characterizing Velma, it was really refreshing. So yeah, I would say she and Matthew for sure.
And of course, like Linda Cardellini is off doing so many crazy things now, with like being introduced to like Marvel and everything. It's just so interesting to see how that's going to play out. And when the film did eventually come out, I believe it took a while to film, because I know that, talking to the people we've spoken to, it was filming around about September 2001 and around then. And of course, it came out the 14th of June in the US, and I think a month later in the UK. But did you get to go to like any of the premieres for the movie when it first came out?
You know what? I did not. And I'm trying to remember why. I think I was already on something else. I think I had to be out of town, unfortunately. It would have been really fun, but because that was back in Los Angeles, and I did actually, come to think of it, no, you're right. I'm thinking of the second one. I did go to the premiere of the second one, and that was at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and they had a really elaborate outdoor stage and bouncy house for the kids, and there were performances and that sort of thing. So I did go to the second premiere, the Scooby Doo 2 premiere, but not the first one. But had a tremendous time on that second one.
It's a shame that you didn't get to go to the first one, but at least you have memories from the second one. And, you know, Scooby Doo 1 is now celebrating its 20th anniversary, which is absolutely crazy. And so many people still love this movie after all this time. You know, JB and myself are definitely two of them. And how does it feel to be involved in a movie that so many people love and cherish?
You know, it's very rewarding. I don't see much of those particular people, although I noted that you interviewed Kent Beta, who was our editor. And Kent Beta is another fantastic individual who had so much to do with helping get the visual effects in order and processed. And yeah, he was a delight to work with. And I got to know he and his family, who were down in Australia as well. So yeah, no, it's very, you know, it's very rewarding when I talk to Bill about it. We have just amazing memories about it. But you know, it is a long time ago, you know, and but you know, I made fast friends with a number of people who I still keep in touch with, including the some of the people that I sort of trained in visual effects, because what you do when you go to a foreign country is you have to hire the help locally, and you have to look for talent in places that might not actually be, you know, visual effects house labs or whatever. At that time, there weren't too many of those. There was a place called Photon, but I managed to find someone to help us with mechanical effects and that sort of thing, you know, who's done an amazing job, you know, since and been involved with Hollywood productions. And I'm gonna forget his name now, because I haven't thought about him in 20 years, but I have seen his name pop up every once in a while, and he's a super talented guy and a visual effects supervisor on his own now. I'll think of it before the end of the interview. But thanks for the memory, you know.
Thank you so much for talking about, you know, the first Scooby Doo movie, because it really is amazing. And 20 years, like, I was only a few months old when it came out, so the fact that, you know, we get to speak to you is amazing. And I guess moving on 2 years later, you got to work on Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. So when you returned for the sequel, did any of your approaches to this movie differ from the first?
There were a few things that differed, yes. You know, it involved a long conversation with Rhythm and Hughes, the makers of Scooby-Doo, the house that basically, you know, would end up doing the computer generated dog again. And they got to retool and have quite a few innovations. I mean, it's some real technical stuff, but they required 2 different models of the dog in the first one, and they decided to go for a universal dog that could do everything, and that had to do with what's called rigging. So we met early on, and they knew they had to make some innovations, and they were going to be doing a lot more real rendering. I mean, it's just a question of, you know, upping the ante on the qualities that you see in the lighting of the fur and all this stuff. But it was a big deal that we could go at it again and have another chance to, you know, bring Scooby to life and look maybe even a little more authentic. And I think we did do better on the second time. But then there was also, you know, we got a little bigger with respect to the creatures that were going to be the bad guys, as it were. As you might know, and I thought you were referring originally to the fact that we had multiple monsters in the original story, and we needed to cast those monsters and to create those monsters. And Bill Bowes came up with lots of different designs. You know, there was the deep sea diver, you know, Captain Cutler, you know, and there were all kinds of other characters. There was Chickenstein, you know, there were all these crazy, funny, and they were rooted in the cartoon series, the original cartoon series. But there was a point at which the number of those characters and the fact that they were practical sort of underwhelmed the producers who were seeing the footage, and they weren't enamored of the idea of how the movie was going to wrap up with the culmination of these monsters kind of coming together and attacking, you know, our heroes. So there was a very big break in the action, and many of the monsters were fired. I think, and there were auditions for some of the monsters that I'm going to have to show you, because I found some of those original auditions, and there are monsters that are in here that some of which, you know, absolutely stayed true through the whole production. But as you may know, we replaced those practical monsters with the tar monster. And the tar monster was, and you know, we also had some wonderful opportunities like the cotton candy monster.
Yes.
You know, we had a lot of great stuff that you know, James Gunn wrote into the episode that I knew I was going to have a blast doing this different stuff. So I'll let me show you a couple of the practical creatures that we were given to work with, and you can see very quickly what happened. Let's see if I have these reels. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share screen again.
Thank you.
So here's the. And are you seeing that screen now?
Not just yet.
Oh, here we go. Sorry.
No.
Okay, here we go. So Scooby Doo monsters. We had, these are a little low contrast because I exhumed them from
The creeper.
VHS footage.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. We've got sound on some of these, but not on all of them. So these are original auditions. We had to film something, and a lot of this was shown to the executives, and they basically made or broke these characters. So obviously this is a variation on, and I sped some of this up earlier, you know, just to show you. They were pretty elaborate reels, and of course there was a lot of makeup involved. Let's see who else there is in here. Okay, here comes the voodoo monster.
Yes.
And this is the original Captain Cut. No, this is the pirate, the 49, the minor 49er. And he actually got changed a little bit. This was a little too Ben Cooper Halloween.
See,
style.
we did speak to C. Ernst Harf, who ended up playing them in the movie, and so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's him. You know,
Wow.
but yeah, he was really taken way down in terms of the costume glitz. You know, this was made to be something that we could work with to make more glowy and fantastic. And I basically took the stance that you really needed to take this down and go more practical with the outfit. So, but I'm just showing you these. It turns out that a lot of them I recorded at high speed.
Holy moly.
I actually watched the Ghost Clown episode last night.
Oh no, yeah. So these were characters that we would have introduced into this show, and there were different variations on the Ghost Clown, you know. But he was evil.
It's crazy because a lot of these still make it into like stuff like the Game Boy game and at the time.
Yes.
They're just not in the movie.
They're just not in the movie. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So
gosh.
they came and went very quickly. Let's see who this is.
Chicken
This is
sign.
Chicken's time.
This is so cool.
There's that beak. Oh my God, it's been a long time since I saw these, but I found this reel, so I thought I'd have to share this.
Like, this is so groundbreaking. I almost want to just
Yeah.
like clip this part of the interview, then keep it for a rainy day for the 20th anniversary of Monsters Unleashed. That's
Yes.
so incredible.
Oh gosh.
There's our voodoo guy. I have one more pass on the voodoo guy that I have to show you. But yeah, this is very much behind the scenes, you know? Like you have to figure out what you've got. Here's the pumpkin guy. And I can't tell you whether there was an original pumpkin guy, but I'm sure there was in the Scooby series, right?
I think it's speculated to have been based on like the Headless Horseman from I think an earlier season, maybe one or two.
Yep, exactly. And then there's different variations on this guy's.
I think some of them make it onto like the Inkworks cards, but just like without any of the stuff. I think just like a screenshot of them from the museum.
See, and they just couldn't buy into this this animation, you know, of the mouth and that sort of thing. It was animatronic stuff. And because they had a Scooby Doo that was computer generated, it was too hard for them to conceive of some of these monsters being credible with old school techniques like this.
I have this it's this holographic little card thing. I wish I brought it down with me, and it's got Velma on one side, and then when you move it, it's got the pumpkin like guy monster. Yeah. And oh wow. There's our
Redbeard
pirate. Oh. We had a Blackbeard pirate.
And they're like boat makes it in, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh wow.
That's so funny that I even made a pass of this. This is just my camera on a tripod, and I was leaving the studio, and I just thought, you know what, I should have a record of these guys.
Yeah, like for real.
It may be the last time. It may be the last time I see them, you know. But it was an old 3/4 inch machine. I mean, this guy's very creepy. I mean, with these glowing costumes. Bill Bowes knew all about these guys, but he didn't have enough to do. He didn't have enough to do with them. There was another designer who was asked to work on these.
Oh, Captain Cutler.
Captain Cutler made it. We had lots of work to do on Captain Cutler's.
Oh my gosh!
And there's a little Velma moment. We just brought Velma stand-in just to show his scale. Okay, now I got to go to a different reel. Let me grab this reel.
Oh wow!
Because this actually I know has sound.
Mark. Extra hot. Action!
This goes on for a while. Different studies. And again, Chickenstein. I realized this is in better shape because it's at 24 FPS.
Why'd the chicken cross the road? To rip off your faces and eat your brains. How about a little southern fried Scooby?
Hey, Mark.
Oh my gosh!
Bye, guys. And set. Action!
Why'd the chicken cross the road? To rip off your faces and eat your brains. How about a little southern fried Scooby?
Oh,
all right.
Wow.
I didn't show that.
Oh, wow.
Here's some of the other things that I had in my curiosities package. So I wanted to show you this because you asked about a very awesome little scene that I was instrumental in creating the shaggy she monster. So this was an elaborate bit of choreography that both Matthew Lillard and a very attractive actress who came in Both did. And basically we had to fuse the two performances together. Peter Boyle was also a treat. The actor, but anyway, yeah, I'll answer your questions about that that funny Shaggy sequence, which I really did have a hard time trying to wrap my head around how exactly we were going to do it, because it was very difficult. But that's how we introduced the tar monster, basically, as part of this team of monsters. So there you go. That's our monster reel. But yeah, no, that was, you know, obviously the ante was up tremendously for visual effects in that second movie, because we had an opportunity to do many more of the, you know, motivated evil characters. And I got to work with really talented groups of different teams in different facilities that made these different characters.
Oh, wow. I mean, this has honestly been an absolute experience of a lifetime. I can't even comprehend what we've seen today. I almost just wish that I could like jump through the screen and it's like, okay, can I please just have 24 hours to just look at this computer, please? Because it's incredible. But I, you know, obviously we have taken up a lot of your time today. So I guess just wrapping up, you know, on, I guess, the future now. Obviously you worked on both Scooby 1 and 2. And obviously, I think that they did have a plan to make a third one, but because of the box office performance of the second one, it didn't go through. But were you ever attached to that at all, or was it cancelled too early to even think about like this side of things?
You know, it was it was rumored, and yeah, some of the same group, including Kent Beta, you know, knew that it might be in the offing, but no, it never got very tangible. And you know, both Bill and Raja and Kent and myself, you know, we were all busy on different things. And so we never took it seriously. We didn't even take the second one seriously until it really was in front of us, you know. It was sort of remarkable that we had this lunch together in Burbank. I still remember, you know, and Raja was there and he said, well, you guys want to do another one? You know, and it's like Bill and I were sitting there and it's like, yeah, I was ready to drop my sandwich, you know. Of course we would do another one, you know. So third one, yeah, would have been great. But of course, you know, Scooby did have his other movies, but you're right, it wasn't the same team. It was a little different. And eventually, of course, the producers did Scoob, which was that CG version that came out fairly recently. And that was in the making and discussed for many years before it actually got done. And I think it got finished just in the last of the pandemic, which was a tough thing on all the productions. But yeah, it would have been great to do a third one. But
I think that was the first movie to ever changed from theatrical release to streaming release, the first one ever, I think. So
true.
Very
that may
interesting.
Be true.
Very interesting.
And I guess, you know, hopefully one day there may be, you know, another Scooby Doo live action. If there is, we really hope that you get brought back on with like Bill and the original cast and crew. Well, I mean, the cast maybe not, but definitely the crew, because you all did such a great job on 2002 and 2004. And you know, do you have any upcoming projects that you can share with us?
Not particularly. I mean, I'm working on an Amazon series. It's completely different than it is not visual effects based. It's actually a very live action based, but it has complexities, and these are the invisible visual effects type shows, which can be very challenging in and of themselves. You know, this particular one is based on a novel, and it takes place in Hong Kong, and it's called Expats, and Nicole Kidman is in it. So I am working in post, and there's still some more work to do on this particular show. All these series take a long time to do because, you know, you've got nearly, you know, however many in the series, you've got nearly a feature length per episode. So the whole introduction of the TV series, you know, starting with the most elaborate ones like Game of Thrones, just introduced us to a much more epic time frame and involvement in doing any of these. But this particular one, you know, it's not the same kind of visual effects involved in things like Fear the Walking Dead or Jack Ryan, which I did subsequently. And I did a small series called Made for Love, which is it's at HBO, and it's basically the hardest thing for visual effects was that it had a computer generated dolphin. Zelda is her name. I don't know if you know that series. It's an unusual, very dark sort of sci-fi premise. But this one is, you know, was a product of just needing sort of a one-man visual effects person to supervise a show in a faraway place like Hong Kong and tie it together with all the other shooting scenarios that were involved in crossing from Hong Kong locations to Los Angeles stages and all that sort of thing. It gets complex, but in the same way that you mentioned Fear the Walking Dead, you think you're going through a very real experience, but I'm going through, as a visual effects supervisor, an elaborate case of breaking something into as many myriad parts as are required to piece it together again in the finale. So similar to this show, but definitely on the finishing side of this. And I'm not sure what I'll do after this. Hard to say.
We will definitely keep an eye out for that. It just sounds absolutely incredible. And in terms of, you know, what's next and what's current, do you have like a website or anywhere in particular where people can keep up with your work?
I'll do a better job of maintaining my Vimeo site in the future. You guys will kick my inspiration into gear, you know, because most of the time I go from show to show, and I rarely even make, you know, a great effort to, you know, put, you know, elaborate reels together. You know, but yeah, I have a visual effects reel that I can definitely put on Vimeo for you, and you can check that out at petercrossman.com.
That's incredible. And I guess that concludes things for today. Thank you so much for the amount of time you've given us, because it's been absolutely incredible. I know that when our other two co-hosts eventually do get round to this, they're going to be like pulling their hair out, wishing that they were here. Like, but honestly, it has been amazing. Like, I cannot even begin to imagine. Like, and thank you for everything. So thank you so much for that. And I guess thank you to everyone watching this. You know, this has been another interview on the JB and Millie channel. We're going to try and coincide the release of this one with the UK anniversary of the 2002 Scooby movie. So look out for that then. I hope you're enjoying it. And all of Rhianna's social links are in the description down below. So please like, comment, and subscribe to JB and Millie, and we'll see you next time.